do want to share a little bit about ASAP accounting and payroll because we do have some non-clients on here too. So this webinar is presented by ASAP Accounting and Payroll. We are a payroll and bookkeeping firm with 3 offices in Colorado. I'm in our Durango office, and we also have an office in Telluride and Golden, just outside of Denver, although 90% of us are working remotely. So we're all joining in today from our home offices. And again, thank you for your participation today. With that, I wanted to introduce you to Kara Stapp, who you see here on our video, and also Carla Reams, both who are HR specialists here at ASAP Accounting and Payroll, and they're going to be the lovely ladies who guide us through today's presentation. So thanks in advance, Kara and Carla, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Diana. So as Diana says, we want to help everyone kind of just understand the difference between FFCRA, which is First Families Coronavirus Act, and then the Colorado's Healthy Families Workplace Act. So the HFWA is in place for Colorado employers only. Okay, so to get started here, what we want to do is just trying to help break this down for you because it is confusing. There's two different types of paid leaves out there. So we just want to try to help simplify it and break it down the best we can. So to start with FFCRA, FFCRA was implemented on April 1st of this year. And under FFCRA, there are 2 different types of paid leave. You have your paid sick leave, which is 2 weeks up to 80 hours of pay. And then you also have your expanded family and medical leave. Under this is 10 weeks of paid leave. Under the Colorado Healthy Families Workplace Act, it is only paid sick leave for up to 2 weeks, up to the 80 hours. This is the minimum requirement. If you already have a sick policy in place and you're offering more than this, that qualifies. This is just what the state and the government put out there as minimum requirements to offer for 2020. To break it down a little more of the exemptions under these 2. Under FFCRA, when it first came out, if you were a federal government employee, you were exempt from this. If you employed healthcare providers or emergency responders, you were able to exclude paying them under this. You also had, if you were over 500 employees, you did not qualify for the FFCRA. And then there's also if you were below 50 employees, and you could provide proof that this would jeopardize the viability of your business. If you had to pay due to school closings or childcare unavailability, you could be exempt from this. Well, then in Colorado came out with the HFWA, the Healthy Families Workplace Act. They put this in place on July the 15th of this year. And so not everyone is exempt like they were under the FFCRA. So under the Colorado paid leave, it's still the same as far as the federal government employees. Or if you're under the Federal Railroad Unemployment Insurance Act, or if you already have a collective bargaining agreement. Those are the only exemptions under HFWA. So as far as qualifying reasons to be paid or pay your employees under FFCRA or HFWA, the reasonings are the same. So they do mirror each other there. So an employee would qualify for paid sick time if they're unable to work or unable to telework due to the following reasons. They're subject to the quarantine or isolation. They've been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine. They've experienced symptoms. They're caring for an individual that is either self-quarantined or advised to quarantine, or the school closure, child school closure. And there's also the experience other similar conditions that's outlined by the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretaries of Labor and Treasurer. So let's break it down a little more here for you. Let's talk about the pay under both FFCRA and HFWA. So for an employee to be paid at their regular rate while being out for one of the qualifying reasons, it has to be one of these top 4 reasons. It either has to be they're subject to quarantine, they've been advised by their healthcare provider, they have symptoms, or similar condition under the guidelines. That, if it's one of those reasons, they have to be out and they qualify for the pay. They're available to have pay at regular rate of pay. Now there is a max. They can only be paid at $511 a day, or the $5,110 over a 2-week period. Now, if they're out for subject caring for another individual or due to school closure, then they're only qualifying to be paid at 2/3 of their regular rate. And again, there is a cap of $200 per day or the $2,000 per over a 2-week period. Now, under FFCRA, that Expanded Medical Leave Act that I mentioned, there is the 2/3 rate of pay for that additional 10 weeks that they may need to be out. Something you notice here on this slide here is it does say the FMLA over a 12-week period. So yes, the FMLA does cover an employee to be out for 12 weeks. Sorry, the extended FMLA, they can only be paid for 10 weeks.
Your volume went out, Kara, for a minute there.
Uh-oh. Okay, can you hear me now?
I think, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure where y'all lost me, but under the extended FMLA, employees do qualify for 2/3 rate of their pay over a 10-week period. Some common questions that we are seeing is how does up to 80 hours work for part-time employees? Because, you know, not everyone's a full-time employee necessarily. So if you have a part-time employee, let's say they work an average of 25 hours a week, well, then they would qualify for 50 hours of leave because that's what they would normally earn in a 2-week period. Like a full-time employee normally works 40 hours, so they would qualify for the 80 hours. So it is based off of what your normal or regular average hours worked per week. And then another common question we get is what happens if an employee is out more than once for one of the qualifying COVID-related reasons. So if an employee's already received pay for one of the reasons that's covered, the employee can count that as part of the 2 weeks. If the employee leave with less than 2 weeks, then obviously you would make up that difference. So an example is, let's say a full-time employee, they were out for 1 week. So you paid them 40 hours under either FFCRA or HFWA, and then they came back to work. Well, a month later, one of the qualifying reasons happens again, and they have to go out of work again. So now they still are able to earn another 40 hours of paid leave to equal the total of 80 hours to meet those minimum requirements. So it can be, lack of better words, pieced together to equal a total of the 80 hours or less, depending if they're part-time. So whatever the average of hours worked within a 2-week time frame. Another common question is, do Colorado employers have to pay under FFCRA and or HFWA? Yes, employers are required to pay for one of the qualifying reasons that we outlined on the previous slide. So the important thing is logging and documenting. So you can pay it either under FFCRA, HFWA, or if you have your own paid time off policy. Just make sure you're clearly recording it and documenting it so you can get the credit if you ever get audited or any issues come up that someone claims that they were not paid for leave. Something good to remember is leave must be paid the the same hourly rate or salary and with the same benefits that the employee normally earns during working hours, or 2/3 of that rate for leave due to child care or care for an individual. Now, the rate must be at least the minimum wage, but does not need to be included when you're doing an average. You don't need to include overtime, bonuses, or holiday pay. Now, if you have employees that are paid commission or based off of sales, just make sure you're paying them whichever is greater, either their hourly or salary rate or the minimum wage. So, common topic right now as school has started for many people. These questions came directly from the Department of Labor. And when you receive these slides, we do have a link there on this slide, so you can see all questions that they've posted, Q&As that they've posted. But these three that we're fixing to cover are the most recent three that do cover specifically childcare and school closures. So question number 98 that they've added, they have 100 questions right now on their website. My child's school is operating on alternate days. The school is open each day, but students alternate between days attending school and the remote learning. So may I take paid leave under FFCRA or HFWA in these circumstances? Yes, you are eligible to take paid leave on these days which your child is not permitted to attend school. And so being told they have to do remote learning on certain days, then that does qualify. And the other question they've added is, my child's school has given me a choice between my child attending in person or participating in remote learning. So the key there is you had a choice. So no, you do not qualify because you're not eligible to take paid leave under FFCRA because the school is not closed. The third question that they've added, my child's school is beginning the school year under remote learning, but they've announced it will continue to evaluate local circumstances. Do I qualify for the paid leave under this? Yes, you're eligible to take the paid leave under the FFCRA or HFWA because the school has remained closed. Now, once it opens back up or gives you the options, then that situation changes. A question we did receive in advance, and we do appreciate those that submitted questions ahead of time. One of them was, can employees who are able to work remotely but can't work full time due to increased child care responsibilities receive the pay? Yes, as long as the hours unable to work are directly related to the school closure or one of the other qualifying reasons. Now, as an employer, you really want to, we encourage, or it is just encouraged in general, to work with your employees who have chosen either to keep kids home or what other circumstances they have. Be flexible. Work them on a reduced schedule as needed. Because if you look at it from the HR perspective here, is when you replace an employee, it could cost 20 to 200% of whatever their yearly salary is. So being flexible with them, especially just during this time, it not only helps your bottom line, but it helps your reputation as a company and, you know, reduces turnover. So just helps in the long run all the way around on both ends. Okay, FFCRA tax credit. I'm going to turn it over to Carla for this fun part.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so I'll go over the tax credit and just a few other important pieces of the FFCRA and HFWA. On the tax credit, I don't have control of the screen. There you go. Covered employers qualify for dollar reimbursement through tax credits for all qualifying wages paid under the FFCRA. Qualifying wages are those paid to an employee who takes leaves under the Act for a qualifying reasons up to the appropriate per diem and aggregate payment caps. So eligible employers, you know, you can claim dollar for dollar. If you are a client of ASAP right now, you can contact their payroll advisor. Most of ASAP clients are already set up to receive the tax credits. So if you have questions and you are a ASAP client, go ahead and reach out on that. Employer claiming the tax credit must retain records and documentation related to the supporting each employee's leave to substantiate the claim for credit. That's, 941s. You can get, employers can get the reimbursement from their 941 quarterly tax statement, or in a quicker manner just by withholding it from their federal payment. So that's just a couple things. That I'm ready to switch slides. On the documentation, I'm not going to read this all to you because you're going to get the information, but reasonable documentation that's allowed is, for one, you can request from your employee when they would like, when the leave is scheduled for, if they know in advance. So you need the date that they're requesting the leave, the reason for the leave, and a statement from your employee, the name of the healthcare provider, and then if the employee is requesting paid leave to care for a child, basically the same documentation, the name of the child requiring the care, the name of the school, place of care. Any HFWA related health information that employers receive must be kept confidential and keep it in a separate file. It does pertain and fall under HIPAA. And then documentation is not required to take the paid sick leave, but it can be required as soon as the employer reasonably can provide it. And go on to the next. There are a few other important points. What we've pointed out are the minimum requirements on paid sick leave. Employers can offer more generous policies, and it's important to have those policies laid out as soon as possible, since this had gone into effect in July for the HFWA for Colorado employers. So if you need help with that, Kara and I can offer help if you're a client of ASAP. And then furloughed employees, there's a gray area on whether or not furloughed employees qualify under the paid sick leave. I did want to touch on this just briefly, but I won't overload you with it. But there's a difference between layoff and furloughed employees. Furloughed employees are still tied to their employer in some fashion, whether it be through benefit, you're supplying benefits for that person, but they aren't currently working for you. In this district court appeal, this New York judge ruled that this furloughed employee was entitled to paid sick leave. So I want to say, if you have a furloughed employee and you're still paying benefits, health insurance benefits or some kind of benefit for that employee, but if they come back to you and request, well, do I get paid under FMLA or through the Healthy Family Workplace Act, don't right off the bat say no. Talk to some legal counsel and get some advice on that before you give a direction one way or the other. Paid leave cannot be counted as an absence. Paid leave, as far as what we've presented in this information in those line items 1 through 6, those cannot be counted as an absence. If an employee already received paid leave in 2020 for COVID-related reasons, that counts as part of the 2 weeks that HFWA requires, but leave provided for non-COVID conditions does not count. So if you have an employee that comes to you and requests time off for one of those 6 reasons, you know, that goes towards the HFWA as far as your documentation goes. But if it's for other non-COVID conditions, it's not required to be part of the documentation, and it doesn't count towards your requirements. Paid sick time provided under this act does not carry over. FFCRA and HFWA both end on December 31st of this year. And employees are not entitled to reimbursement for unused leave upon termination, resignation, retirement, or other separation of it from employment. So, you know, if you currently already have a policy in place that provides for paid sick time for your employees, and it meets the HFWA requirements, that's great. Just make sure that you communicate that in your policy, and you update your policy, but you communicate that that time fulfills your requirements as an employer. And if they utilize that time, the 2 weeks, you know, that it would be documented and it'll follow under the COVID, you know, it's got to follow under the COVID conditions. That doesn't mean that they can't use their sick leave for, you know, non-COVID conditions, but you just need to communicate that to your employees, how you're going to utilize that accrual of sick time or whatever. If you, it's almost best to set up a whole different scenario for this specifically, but if you already have something that fulfills it, just be really cautious and make sure that you communicate that out to your employees. If a public health emergency is declared, the employee is entitled to an additional 2 weeks up to 80 hours where sick leave has been exhausted. Any balance of sick leave under the public health emergency is valid for 4 weeks after the public health emergency is declared over with. So let's say you have an employee who already has taken 2 weeks or 80 hours of their time, you know, of the time for sick leave under the FFCRA before HFWA was enacted. Now, and we're in a public health emergency right now, and then it's over with, and then now they're, you know, they declare another one, either the county or a state official declares a public health emergency. You have to allow that employee an additional 2 weeks of time. And once that public health emergency is in effect, that 2 weeks of time is still valid until up to 4 weeks after the public health emergency has ended. So just be cognizant of that. I'm sure there's going to be questions, but we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, and Carla, one thing I wanted to clarify too, in terms of the expiring on December 31st, the Colorado's Healthy Families Workplace Act, there is 2021. Today we're just covering this emergency portion that expires on December 31st, and we'll talk later about how we'll have updates as it pertains to the longevity of this act and what you need to do in 2021. But I just wanted to point that out if someone got confused there.
Right, yeah, and I think we have that on another slide here too. Thank you. This slide shows the poster that the state of Colorado has put out for the requirements of the Healthy Families and Workplace Act. Currently, as of yesterday, the link was broken, but hopefully they're going to have that available, and you can print this off as an employer. This has to be posted in a conspicuous place in the workplace, and you also have to send notification to all of your employees in paper format somehow, either by email. When I say paper format, I'm just talking like send them a letter or an email, and also post this. So, you know, post your policy, get your policy, talk about your policy to your employees, post this in a conspicuous place in your workplace. I know a lot of workplaces right now are have their employees working remotely. You have to reach out to those employees and make sure that they are informed on what their rights are as an employee and what you're required to do as their employer. So the website is thecolorado.gov. Excuse me. We can go to the next slide. So this is what Diana was just talking about. When I said the HFWA, those requirements end December 31st, what I'm meaning is the requirements that fulfill the FFCRA portion ends December 31st of this year. There are requirements that the HFWA and for the state of Colorado has implemented effective January 1 for employers with 16 or more employees, and that's to provide paid sick leave to their employees, and they'll accrue 1 hour for every 30 hours worked up to 48 hours of time. The HFWA will encompass mental health, domestic abuse, criminal harassment, sexual assault for both the employee and an immediate family member, or child that they have to care for in their home, or that they've been, I can't remember the term, but that you're in control of a child that you're in control. So those are things that ASAP we will be presenting that next month in October to prepare employers for, and then effective January 1, 2022, employers with 15 or fewer employees will fall under these requirements where it's 1 hour of accrued time for every 30 hours worked. So, excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat. I'm about to cough. But if you have questions, go ahead and post them on the Q&A at the bottom. We'll try to answer some of those. And we can go to the next slide. I'm not sure what's.
Awesome. We can, while we are starting to bring up and answer some of these questions, we will answer these questions live. We'll leave this kind of slide up there, but I'm also going to launch a couple polls in here because I just want to get a sense of your size and what kind of assistance you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and launch these polls while we answer the questions.
Yeah,
and Kara, Carla, hopefully you're...
Sure.
Okay, great. Do you want to just be sure to state the question before you start to answer?
Okay, I'll go with, whoa, let's see, your poll showed up in front of the question. Does PTO count towards the 80 hours? Yes, you can, if you currently have a PTO policy, you can use that as long as it meets the requirements of the sick paid time off. So, and you need to specify that in your policy to your employees, how you're going to utilize the PTO to meet that criteria. But basically, if the employee has the accessibility from day one, utilize, I'm sorry, there's some in my ear. If the employee has accessibility to that pool of time from day one, from their first day on the job, that meets the requirements. If you don't, Kara, can you mute? Can somebody mute? I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not hearing any feedback, so I'm not sure what's going on. But
okay.
Just to add to what Carla said is, that's another reason it's important to document. So if you just have a PTO policy and you have everything combined, it's important to document the reason that they used that time off. And if it was under one of the COVID-related reasons and you're using it as that required sick pay, to document that. So that way it doesn't come back as, well, no, I used that as vacation time and you haven't paid me my, the 80 hours due under FFCRA or HFWA. So that is important to make sure you're distinguishing what was used when for what reasonings for yourself as an employer.
Yeah, let's see. On April's question,
And someone did have yeah.
How does the tax credit work for nonprofit 501c3? The tax credit, if they have a payroll, it works the same way. If you have a payroll and you're filing quarterly taxes, it would work some way.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yep, correct.
Now,
There's
if
no
they're filing a
difference for
941,
nonprofit.
so the tax credit would be, you can get the credit. So you document the time off, you get the credit while you're applying for your 941 quarterly. Or when you're making the federal tax payment at the end of the month, you can withhold that time or withhold that money.
Yeah, and just a quick plug there. Carla said before, but if you're an ASAP client, we need to know what exact hours need to be counted. So when you're submitting payroll, you need to let us know what hours need to be tracked as FFCRA. Don't just anticipate that you submit sick time to us that we're going to assume that needs to be counted. You need to communicate with your account manager and make sure you're in contact with our tax director, Joan, to make sure that credit is applied for.
And tax credit is not retroactive before the laws are passed. It starts on April 1st is when FFCRA was in place. So it doesn't count for anything that happened before April 1st.
Right. There's a question from Christine.
Another good question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take
that? No, go ahead, Carla.
If one employee is tested positive for COVID, but the supervisor was in contact with that employee, then subsequently 10 others, and the office needs to close for quarantine, do all 12 employees qualify for FFCRA? Yes. You would have to supply all 12 employees with up to 80 hours of paid sick time. And that's, on the surface, it looks like a deal killer, really, right? Because it can break the bank, but you do get that credit dollar for dollar back through the tax credit. So remember that. But yes, they would all qualify for the paid sick leave.
And kind of just we're in the trenches with you kind of comment on that question. We've seen some businesses set up what we call like A team and B team. So it's probably not in your best interest to have all 12 employees in one office together. And so if you can offer flexibility and offer some employees to work remotely, and the A team and B team concept has proven really successful to people. So you have an A team that's in the office and the A team does not interact with the B team. And so if something goes down with the A team and they all need to go home, the B team can then step in and fill in. And so I think a lot of employers are implementing these type of strategies because to avoid your whole business being shut down again for those isolation periods. So all in all, you got to be flexible. And so I just want to encourage kind of some reality there of, what can you do to be creative and flexible to help your business stay afloat and stay open. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think
it's a great 2 cents.
As an employer, if we have been in compliance with FFCRA, are we in compliance with Colorado HFWA? Yes, you are for 2020. And then, like we said, in 2021, that will change to the 1 hour of accrual per 30 hours worked. And you do, on that one, I mean, we'll get into it later in October, but you can count overtime as hours worked. You'll have to count overtime as hours worked also. So, and then in regards to 2021 required sick leave, does this still apply if we do not normally offer sick leave, rather PTO, vacation sick, personal, or lumped together? So when you're using PTO, you do for the 2021, when you're saying your employee is going to accrue 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, they're accruing sick time. So I mean, as long as you have a mechanism for proving that you've accrued the appropriate amount, of time for that person, that will meet the requirements of the HFWA. You know, you have to track, you have to show 2 years of documentation on that, which is you know, our October discussion, but you can meet the requirements through PTO, yes, as long as, you know, as long as it fulfills the 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, and you can prove that.
And I think, again, only just from a perspective of in the trenches too, I know like a lot of people at this point do lump it all into one bucket. It doesn't take too much to separate them out, and it requires a lot less headache and tracking internally. It might be worth consider breaking these into 2 different policies. I know it might seem like a big change, but it will also help with record keeping a lot better if you track them separately, just right in payroll even, or in your time clock. And to that extent, I think I have gotten the question of like, do we need to implement a policy for the current paid sick leave requirements in terms of like changing your handbook? You know, I would change your handbook for 2021 in terms of addressing the things today. I think the notice requirements and making sure employees know that they're eligible, and perhaps like a 1-page addendum, but I don't think you need to go revising your handbook to then revise it again in a couple months. So just keep that in mind. Again, from a practicality perspective, you know, we can plan ahead. Looks like we got one more question. Let's see, the days to be paid, if COVID related, it has to be pre-COVID, like a positive test, or just suspected but no conclusive proof. So Kara actually has the slide for this on the screen, so this should answer your question. But these are the 6 reasons. And you'll notice that even number 6 is experiencing substantially similar conditions. And so, of course, as we all know, the symptoms for COVID can mirror symptoms for an allergy infection, a common cold, a flu. And so you'll want to look at that very closely and make sure that you understand the qualifying reasons that fall under this paid sick leave. So hopefully these reasons here describe that. Another question that came in, are we going to send the slides? Yes, we will send the slides along with the video recordings to all the attendees or people who registered for the webinar.
Yeah,
and with that, unless Kara, go ahead, Carla.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and I need more clarification, but there is something about asking your employee for documentation after the fourth day. So, and I think that aligns with, you know, what this question was about. Does it have to be proven COVID or just symptoms? So, you know, after the 4th day, then that's when you can get the documentation probably for and I'm guessing that's because the testing and stuff takes long, but it doesn't have to be proven. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks. Great. Well, let's see here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's presentation. I appreciate everyone's participation, and I especially appreciate Carla and Kara for taking time to prepare and present this information. So if you have any further questions and you're a client of ASAP's, feel free to email your account manager or our payroll team, and we can get those questions answered or try to direct you to the right resource. The other thing I will send along with the recording and the slides is a copy of the posting requirement. I do have that in PDF, unless they're making changes, and that's why the link is down. So we're keeping a close eye on that, and we'll try and get that out to everyone as well. So again, I'll show my video really quick. We are real people, but thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day and a great Labor Day weekend. Thanks, everyone.